Since '84, how many years is that? 30, 40, yeah, 38.
About how long you've been to.
I worked for the city of Orem for 8 years. I was public works director. Then I became the city manager over in Linden and retired there. So I've got some history in city work.
Where were you in California?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't in California? Oh, I was thinking Bill Holdership said you were from California. That's why I was, okay.
Hello.
No, it's not there.
I haven't seen you guys forever.
So we have one more, so Leslie was gonna
Yeah.
introduce
Yeah.
yourself.
Him. I'm Leslie Nelson Weil. I've been married 31 years, it's my anniversary today. Everybody knows me by Nelson because I go by my maiden name in business, but I'm kind of trying to it's not easy. I thought it would be hard at first, it's, no, it's been 31 years. Anyway, and I've been on this commission, I don't know how many years, we just haven't had any meetings since it looks like 2019. I was on the traffic commission, I loved that. I was thinking about that as I came along State Street, driving from the north, driving between those yellow lines for about a block. And to get into the left turn lane to come up First North. I remember when I was on that, we were talking about putting concrete islands there, and I'm glad we haven't.
They're going in.
Dang it.
They are.
People need to learn how to get out of the one lane. Anyway, all right, done. I am from California and I do know how to drive. Okay,
Oh.
done.
So the five of you, possibly the Board of Adjustment, right? So the rest of us are staff. Matt Taylor, he's a long-range planner here. I'm Jason, planning manager. And then we got, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Well, everybody knows Steve. Eric McKnight.
I'm Aaron McKnight. I'm also with the attorney's office.
I'm Steve Earle. I know everybody except for this gentleman right here. So I'm the interim city attorney. So,
Interim?
interim, yeah.
They
Right
haven't hired you yet.
You're not fired yet?
I'm doing the job, but it's not like the full-fledged official thing yet. So
For some reason, I thought you had gone somewhere else. But I'm glad you're here.
yeah, I'm still here.
And we have Cheryl Vargas behind us. She's a planner as well. But she's in the recording, minute-taking role now. So if we have more, you might see Cheryl do presentations.
So have we always had two attorneys?
No, what's happening is I've traditionally been the counsel for the Board of Adjustment. We're kind of transitioning and having Aaron do it.
Okay.
So
We knew how hard you guys were, so we thought.
back up.
Once every 3 years?
So before you, there's gonna be 2 strips of paper. We need to vote, if you would please, for a chairman tonight, which will carry on in 2 years, and we'll have to re-vote again. But if we have more meetings within the year, well, then that chairman will act as the chairman throughout that time period. We haven't had a chair, we just simply selected somebody, but I figured maybe we could have one, and then we can, if we do meet again, we'll have that artist.
Sure.
And the chair will be the chair tonight's meeting, just so you know.
Yeah, that comes with it as well. If you want to just, so I can just kind of pick up. So the way we're gonna work it is the most vote getter will be the chair, the second most vote getter will be the vice chair, if that's acceptable to the board. And then we'll just go that route. So in the absence of the chairman, we need 3 people to make a quorum in this, because it's 5 on the, so for whatever reason, we have another meeting, we only get 3 of you. Hopefully, either the chairman or the vice chairman will be here, or we'll.
Can I just, does anybody want to be the chair? Because I don't.
I know.
Nobody does. That's the
That's,
beauty of it.
yeah.
That means you're all qualified.
So you get
Don't
voted
wanna do
once,
it.
right?
Yeah,
So Jason,
yeah. You'll see
I
what
need
one
to
of
know
those
their
says.
names. I've forgotten their names. Sorry.
So Leslie. Totally just forgot.
Karen.
Karen, thank you.
Julio.
Carlos, and then David. hold a board of adjustment just for a discussion item, at least I haven't. But tonight's kind of a unique issue, we'll get to that just, let's go to the, and have the attorneys count if you will.
Oh.
So as a discussion, we're just learning about it, is that
So
what?
we're gonna learn about it, it's chapter 10, which is the flood chapter, which is a very stringent chapter. It was updated, FEMA required the cities, at least the state of Utah, I'm familiar with, in Utah, update their, in order to, back up. So we do have what the,
You like that one?
Who was that?
Not me.
It said not me.
so there,
He nominates you.
do you wanna,
What's that?
got that right?
No, two of you did that, anyone but me. Okay, well, looks like with 2 votes, Karen.
You're kidding.
And everybody else got 1, well, most of them.
I should have said.
So I don't know what we're gonna do about vice chair then.
Do we vote?
Yeah, I guess you revote for vice chair.
I don't know.
Do you have enough strips?
Oh, good, I'm so used to
Whoever wrote not me, I think they should be
it. Yeah, exactly.
Whoever wasted the other paper.
That was me, sorry.
Just kidding. So there's a community rating system within the FEMA organization that requires cities, if they want to participate, to do certain criteria and meet certain ideas in order to meet the FEMA requirements. And what the FEMA allows you to do is get a break on your flood insurance. So if you're in a flood plain and you have to get flood insurance, the city, if the city is a certain rating, then you get a certain percentage off. So right now, we're a 7, so we get, I think it's 30%. So if you had to have flood insurance through FEMA, you could get a percentage.
We're not making this easy, Jerry. We have a talk.
That's just that Karen is the chairman.
Let her select, so.
That's a good idea.
Oh.
That's a good idea.
Let's wait and see what she thinks. Yeah, it's fine. I think if you guys don't have any objection, we'll just go with the chair, and then if we have a problem, we need to elect a new vice chair at some point, we can do that.
Okay.
At that, is that okay? That's fine.
So
Unless you just really wanna have a runoff.
Arm wrestling maybe?
first one that can run around the building. So with the community rating system, anyway, FEMA required us to update the standards, so they're pretty strict as far as what can be done. There's certain requirements that you have to meet. There's, I don't know if you've had a chance to read, but anything that's built within the floodplain has to be at least 1 foot above the
Base flood elevation.
base flood elevation thing. So in this instance, because it's up the river and there really is not a lot of development up the river, FEMA maps that were updated in 2020 did not specifically specify what that level was. So there's certain areas around the community that don't have that elevation figured out because it's not necessarily developable or not a lot of development going on. So they did spend a lot of time determining that because it does take a lot of engineering to determine that. So the applicant has come in and he's actually within,
Excuse me, before you go on.
Yeah.
You were saying you have to be elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation, but here, section 10.4.5 G3, the structure will be permitted to be built with the lowest floor elevation below
so
the
if
base
the,
flood
yeah, if the
elevation.
board,
So that's contradictory,
so that's,
unless I just don't get
so
it.
that's within the variance section. So if the board decides to grant a variance,
Oh,
then they would be required to understand that they would be paying the 100% or flood insurance coverage. They wouldn't get a
They wouldn't.
deductible on any of their flood insurance. So that's within the parameters that the board can do. If they choose to do it, they could grant it below that. But we don't know what it is anyway, so that's kind of the meeting with this applicant a few years ago, well, it seems like years ago, we met with several applicants, so let me show you the property. So here is Will's good stuff, if you're not familiar with the property, on Thibodeau Oaks Park, so there's 5 homes that are just barely inside Orem City's property. So you see the blue line is Orem City's boundary, Provo Canyon is that way, Provo owns this portion here. So they're within the jurisdiction of Orem. If we go to, let me just go through the slide, so this is less than 300 square feet, it's this home right here. It's a cabin that was built back in the early 20s. These have since been remodeled, but they were remodeled prior to this more stringent restrict standard. You can see the Provo River going through, so it's basically borders on the river. This is the current and updated flood map that was done in June of 2020. You can see that it runs right through the homes. So because it's in Zone A and it is subject to potential flood, the ordinance requires them to at least give us what that base flood elevation is, and they have to build 1 foot above it. Well, they don't know what that is, and so in talking to them, we've asked them, in order for us to get a permit, or to give them a permit, or at least to consider a permit, they need to get that done. And they're indicating that it's probably between 10 and 15,000 for them to hire an engineer to go out and determine what that is. So before they went to that expense, and then they come to the board for a variance, and you say no, they would rather know up front if there's an indication or hint that the board may grant it, then they would go out and spend the money and determine that and come back in a future.
Who paid for the FEMA to come in and who paid for that, to get that standard in 20?
So so these maps were updated by the federal government. So they hired local consultants, local engineers, a local firm to actually go out.
So it wasn't a burden on the city
It was not.
or the residents?
We did, when we updated our CRLS, our community rating system, we do that annually. And when they did it, the 5-year update is when we were told we had to update the whole chapter. So that was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, we updated the chapter that requires them to connect to a city sewer system.
Right.
So now that they're in that, they want to tear down and rebuild, by statute, it says you have to connect to the city sewer system. Well, it's about 2 miles from the upper, from where their home is, down to the potential connection, which is here, which is a lift station right here. So they'd have to come all the way down the canyon, connect to that, and let it up. So it's rather expensive for them to do that, obviously, they're not gonna do it for a small home. So that's why they're here initially, is to get a variance, but there are other standards that we have to make sure that they can comply with before we get too far. So in talking, Steve and I have talked to this gentleman, or I've talked to Steve, as we've worked together. There's several standards that they need to come into compliance with. One of the bigger ones is to determine what that base flood elevation is. I mean, it's an active river.
Yeah.
It is protected by the dam, and it's, but you never know the runoff, you never know about avalanche, there's
Yeah.
several things that come down from the dam that could potentially happen if there's a big rainstorm. You could have a potential flood issue, so we need to know what that is so that we can then make sure that they can build according to that, and then.
So Jason, question.
Sure.
The other 4 homes, I think there's 4 other ones,
Or other ones, yeah.
they don't know what the base flood elevation is,
They
so you don't know where they fit.
We don't, because they were built prior to,
Yeah.
they were probably built the same year, they've added on to it over the years, but
Yeah.
initially it was probably built prior to any of these standards being in place.
Before even getting to that point though, we moved here in 93. And I do a lot of cycling and running. I don't remember ever those homes being destroyed by a flood. Not to say that it can't happen.
Right. I mean,
So we're
historically,
looking
they haven't been.
29 years, so the odds are they're,
The odds-
that floodplain elevation or whatever that minimal.
Right. So, let's just go through these slides real quick. So this is the home, right? It's a pretty small home, less than 300 square feet. What they ultimately want to do is tear it down and rebuild.
Right.
But there's a couple other things we'll get into, but I don't know if you can see, you can't really see the river. You can see the river back. There, you can see the river. But it's, standing here, it's probably 8 to 10 feet elevation difference
Okay.
between the river and where I don't know what the high flood or high runoff rate is for the program. It's pretty well controlled, so it's gonna be some unique storm event that's probably gonna or the dam breaks, but in that case, nobody's gonna care.
The way to think about a 100-year floodplain is it's a 1% chance of flooding.
Is there any consideration about the runoff from the roof of this proposed home, as well as the roofs and the driveways, et cetera, of the other homes there? Because those can also contribute to a lot of groundwater.
They could. That's where the county health department comes in with the septic tank that they have. It was built obviously years and years ago. They claim that it was updated probably 5 years ago, but there's a new standard in the health department that doesn't allow a septic tank to be within 100 feet of a river. That's what I was about to ask. So, and then at the edge of the property, I measured it before I came in, I didn't have a map, but the 100-foot line from the edge of that property is about right here.
The red is the septic system.
So that's the existing septic. This is where they want to propose to put, the home sits about right here.
Okay.
They want to add over here about 2,400 square feet. Talking to the county health department guy the other day, basically was stating that even if the board were to grant a variance, they don't know that they would actually approve a septic tank to be redone in that location. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. There is an expensive alternative that allows a lot of filters and different things that would prevent excess to get into the river, which is about a 50,000. This is his quote, not mine. Another 50,000 to do an upgraded septic tank that would allow them to do that. So there's a couple of issues that they're going to have to do before they come back to you for a variance. But tonight we just want to kind of, the applicant will be here at 6, just to kind of get your ideas of what your thoughts are of granting that variance. And really the variance is for the connection to the sewer, or the septic, or excuse me, the sewer line. And then the other ones are really just making sure that he complies with everything else, which is the engineering drawings, the base flood elevation, the drawings that would show that it's above. And the engineer's also gonna have to show that whatever design it is, isn't gonna contribute. So if there was a flood coming here, it's not gonna pivot around and flood those more extensively than it would if there wasn't. They're gonna have to show that that's not gonna cause additional downstream damage to the house next to them if they all of a sudden put some type of wall that diverts it around them and floods the people down. So there's a lot of different criteria that we're gonna have to meet before it ever gets back to the board. Ultimately, the purpose tonight is really just a discussion with the applicant to see if it's something you can do.
So yeah, it's basically to see if the board's willing to grant a variance from the requirement to connect to the sewer system.
Right.
And Jason, if he was gonna rebuild there, would he have to relocate the septic tank?
Yes. So
Where would it?
Well,
the way that the county interpreted it was that if they just remodeled, so they just took the small 285 square feet and wanted to remodel the whole thing, they wouldn't have any issue with them just using the existing septic tank. But if they want to add on to, let's say they want to keep the home and add on to it, then the additional square footage would be calculated into that existing septic. If it's over and above their standards, they will make them redo the whole.
Do we know what that is on the existing? Is it, I don't even know
How
how they
much?
measure the usage of a septic tank. Is it like, is this house lived in every day? Is it a 2-bedroom home?
The standard he explained to me is like if it's a 2-bedroom or less, then he thinks that it might be acceptable.
Okay.
It just depends on but then the square footage comes into play, how much of the addition is gonna be over and above what's already there. So if he doubles the size, for example. then
Where
that's
there's gonna be more uses?
So Jason, my question, I guess, was really more at is, if he has to relocate the septic tank, is there a good likelihood that it'll be in a better location, farther from the river?
Not very many choices.
It's
Well,
not,
Yeah,
but
there's not
I mean, it's
much
pretty close
property.
right now, and you might get another 30, 40, 50 feet away.
But what about the health department issue? You said it had to be 100 feet from the
So the
river.
base standard is that if they, let's say they wants to build the 2,400 square foot home, 1,400 square foot home, the county says that's great, you gotta put a whole new septic system in, it has to be 100 feet away, and the slopes don't work, what that is, I mean, the only alternative is right through here.
So that's-
Yeah.
If that doesn't work, then he'd have to figure something else out, but that's something he's gonna have to work through the county, the health department.
Right.
In order to get that approved, and before I'm going to bring it back to the board, we'd have to have something from the county stating.
Yeah.
Okay,
Here's
that's
what
what I
they-
was wondering.
Yeah, I don't wanna, I wouldn't wanna approve it unless all the other hurdles were.
Because it's pretty,
If-
I mean,
if-
the county was pretty specific on saying that I'm not sure that he's gonna be able to get.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right.
So Jason, the other homes in there have their own individual septic systems?
They do. They're actually connected to Provo City Water. Here's the Provo Water, there's a main meter that feeds all four lines. We got a call this afternoon from, I think this lady here that owns it. This says that on occasion the water does get diminished, so the heat of the summer, dryness of the summer, it does kind of run out of water. Is that what she's saying?
Doesn't make it to them, essentially.
So, they are the water, it's really the septic is the issue. And the county health department is the one in charge of that, so.
Probably doesn't matter, but is it gonna be a full-time occupancy?
But that I don't know. The applicant will have to.
It probably doesn't matter as far as this.
I would imagine.
So we can ask the applicant.
The applicant is, I think, an outline, so I think it's gonna be more.
Or unless he makes it an Airbnb or something like that, you know.
Well, probably have to assume that it is.
Yeah, that's
Because
exactly.
even if this owner doesn't wanna make it, the next person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So if you look at what they're proposing, this is of course,
No.
so it's a 2-bedroom, looks like it's kind of, could be Airbnb type.
yeah, that does look like it.
yeah, which is fine, I mean, he's a property owner, he can do whatever, as long as he can meet the
Yeah.
requirements, I'm like,
So chances are, based on this size, he would have to, if he wants to rebuild, he's gonna have to get a new septic system. Whole new approval from Utah County, which will be difficult,
Yeah.
not impossible, but difficult and possibly expensive.
And the study for the base flood elevation,
And that's gonna be at
that's
least,
additional cost.
That's
yeah, 10 to 15.
This is a problematic lot.
Yes.
Yeah, what's what
Crazy.
is the owner going to do if it's denied?
So his really alternative is to remodel the 300
Existing.
square foot shack.
Keep it small.
Can he add on some square footage?
So that would be a function of the county, you go to the county and say, you wanna add, how much can I add?
Yeah.
Keep what I have.
okay.
Even with that, they're gonna have to do a study to show
Flood.
with the county how big the basin actually is. Probably do a study that the flow, the percolation rate and all that would meet the standard of whatever
The
they wanted to add.
field drain.
The biggest hurdle I think for them is because they're so close to the river, they would have that 100-foot. So, but talking to the county, if they just simply remodel, they would most likely allow them to keep what they have now and just remodel it. Because he wants to tear down, build, that kind of throws us into a bunch of others.
Well, if that would be it, that's a lot nicer than the ones further down there.
So the three things that we really need before, I think the board can decide whether or not the variance is granted is, of course, all the engineering drawings to make sure that it can meet all the other applicable requirements, 1 foot above, all that stuff, to actually determine the base flood elevation. The county, like we discussed, will have to at least get some verification from the county that whatever he's proposing and wherever the location of the septic system is, that it would actually meet their requirement and work. And then there is some Provo water users that actually take water out of the river below this. And so they may have some say in whether or not they want to have another septic tank. It would potentially have a problem leaching into the river because they do take it out and divert it to other locations north for Sullivan County and some other locations south. So that's a potential one. I don't know if that's a big deal. Talking to one of the people on the board, he wasn't quite sure that it would be that big a deal, but you never know. So those are the three main issues that we want to resolve before it ever came back to the council. And that's really an expense on his part. He knows that he's gonna have to, fork out the money to do that, but he wants to at least discuss it with the board before he does.
Would he need to remove the existing septic tank, or would that be considered a greater opportunity for a hazardous
I would imagine the county would probably make him take it out, or do whatever they do to fill it.
They usually just fill them up with dirt.
They do what, fill them up with dirt?
Whatever that
Does
process.
the city, and I don't know how that works, but does the city have any interest to help on, let's say, we're like, okay, if he meets all those standards, I mean, those are some pretty expensive, and that's his risk for buying the property, right, owning that property, but is there any kind of grants that he can qualify to get a portion of assistance on the evaluation of the flood line elevation or the septic tank being put in? Because the city has no desire to put sewage 2 miles.
No, I don't think so. I think his avenue would be to get a variance. His other, block, or stumbling block is the fact that there's other entities that are involved, the county, for one,
Right.
public water users. So if it was somewhere else that wasn't next to a river, it may not be that big. I mean, granting of a variance may not be as critical or a big deal. We have in the city, there's, I don't know how many, there's probably hundreds of homes that are on septic tanks that just haven't converted yet. But, so it's not like we don't have septic tanks, we don't like them to be on septic. So when they have the ability to connect to sewer, we try to get them to connect. But in this instance, I don't know if the city will ever run a line for 5 lots on the canyon. It's too expensive. That's what we have. I don't know if Aaron, you have anything to add?
Where there are parks up and down the river with restrooms. Are they on septic systems?
Most likely.
I remember, I came to, first time I was ever in Provo, actually, I came to, when I was a senior in high school in 1986 to look at BYU, and we stayed with that family down in the river bottoms, and that year they were sandbagging because the Provo River was super, super high, and it makes me want, if that didn't flood it, then it's probably okay.
Like I said, those existing homes have been there for,
A lot longer than the river bottoms
Yeah.
homes,
yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah. As far as staff, I don't know that we have an issue with the variance itself, but
Yeah.
we do want to make sure they comply.
they comply,
with the other
yeah,
standards in chapter
yeah,
2.
no, it's,
Anything we do in the floodplain, we have to document. Obviously, if the board grants the variance, we'll document that. So next time they come and do a review of ours, we will let them know that hey, we've granted this. And it also requires us to have a certification from an engineer that they have built their home 1 foot above. So that will ding us if we don't. So obviously, we're going to require them to provide that information with an engineer that verify that here's the elevation by space flood, here's the elevation of the home. It meets that criteria, so that we have that on record. So that's kind of one of our biggest hurdles is that information.
Who did you say determines that?
So they have to hire an engineer.
They have to hire somebody to do it.
They've contacted JUB Engineering, which is a local firm, and that's between 10 to 15,000. And he's willing to do it, he just doesn't want to do it and then get denied.
And then not be able to do it, yeah, sure.
What's involved in that kind of study?
you pray. You pray, and God says, I feel good, let's go over it.
They have to do surveys, they have to do some, I think, some historic data and all that kind of stuff to figure out what, if any, there were any floods in the past, what the elevations are and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know if they had to work with actually FEMA to determine that and have this added to the map. That's something we'd have to determine. That's something the city may help. In the future, if we determine what that is, we may then pursue
Okay,
as a city and do that.
yeah,
It still costs the city to make applications
for sure,
these types of maps as well.
well, it'd be very sad if that floodline came up like middle of the house, the existing homes. So that means he would be 100% self-insured for flood insurance, right?
Yeah, if it was.
Because he would have to be below the line if that line comes up. Today shows that it's, 5 feet from the ground where that cabin sits.
Yeah, if any of these.
Would that affect the other houses?
Any of these homes, well, any of them,
Would it make any difference for them?
anyone that has a mortgage on their home most likely has to have the flood insurance.
Flood insurance because
If
we're
you own it outright, I don't know if you have to, you
Right.
probably would want to, but.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a break on the insurance, basically.
So Jason, we've lived here all these years and I had no idea that there were homes.
I'm glad you said that, because neither did I.
So I went up there and tried to find them. And I was driving, is that it? It was little, oh my
There's
goodness.
one,
If you ride your bike right there on the pathway, you
Yeah.
see it every time.
Oh, right there,
Yeah.
okay.
There's a little
Yeah.
break.
Yes.
so there's,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a guardrail that's right here, so you're driving fast enough, you're gonna miss that. And then this has a lot of trees,
Yeah.
so there's only a little glimpse of some of those
Yeah.
homes.
And I would also like to say that this is one of the most complete staff reports I've seen. Good job. It's very comprehensive and professional.
Well, we had it approved by the attorneys.
We got twice as big.
Yeah.
It didn't require very much editing.
Oh.
It's already really good.
Appreciate it.
So it was 2 pages, and now after the attorney looked at it, it's 10
We do
pages.
get paid by the word.
I appreciate that. I think that's all, somebody else, so 6 o'clock, so we probably need to go on that list.
So basically, we're just trying to find out more information about
And
it and let him know what he needs.
Wait, man, they got Karen's name chair. Bam.
Test, test. Does it work?
We ready? Okay. We'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Adjustments. We've asked David Moulton to give the invocation.
Our Father in heaven, I'm grateful to be here today in service of our city and grateful for the opportunity we have to meet together and we're ask a blessing upon us that we'll make wise decisions and be able to discuss the issue at hand and and more fully understand it. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
The scheduled item tonight is 3.1 is a variance discussion. And it's for the property located at 2501 East Provo Canyon Road in the OS5 zone. So are you the applicant?
I am.
Thank you for coming. So do you want to present your information to us?
I'm looking at, so I'm under contract on this property right now. And I just needed to see what the city will allow me to do. So I understand that there is a part of the code that says any new build, any substantial improvement on a building has to be hooked up to sewer. Obviously, there's no sewer up there, and there probably never will be. Right now, they're all on septic, all those 5 homes. And so I get the variance that I'm asking is that I can substantially improve or build a new, smaller cabin on that property and hook up to the existing septic. So I hired a septic company out of Heber to come down and excavate the lid, look at it, look at the drain field. It seems to be all in working condition. I had him put a riser lid on so I don't ever have to excavate it again. It's a 1,000-gallon Duracrete tank, which is a concrete tank, which is on the nicer end of what you want as far as a septic tank goes. So that's what I'll be asking tonight is to consider being able to build a small cabin and hook up to the septic.
The septic system that you have now, the 1,000-gallon, right? What's the square footage that you can use? Or
Well,
that can use that
so Orem City doesn't have an established system to determine if a septic can support a certain home. Like there's nothing in writing in code. So Drew Rasmussen said that he uses the number 150 gallons per person, so per room per day. So the setbacks on here really limit what I can build anyway. So the plans that I put forth are a 1,455 square foot home, which will fit inside those setbacks. And that's only a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So that septic, based on what I'm hearing from professionals in that world, and Drew Rasmussen himself said that would easily support a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. There's just nothing that says, there's nothing in Orem City Code that says this size of system will support this size of a home. But that's just what they use, is 150 gallons per person per day, per bedroom per day.
In talking to Drew, he did indicate that by redoing your home, you'd have to redo the sewer as well, or septic, and relocate it outside of the 100-foot setback. So that's something you'll need to.
Where's that on here?
Well, the line's going to be clear back there. So that's something you're going to have to work out with the county. Even though the existing may support it, they may not approve a remodel.
Oh, where it
by
is?
using where it is.
Oh, okay.
So that's just something that we'll have to get.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I'm gonna have to do, even with a variance. So I understand that. So I just didn't want to do any more work on it or incur any more expenses before I knew if it was even possible to build a home and hook up to the septic.
You say that you did put in a new septic system?
No, the current owners did in about 1990. So it's a newer tank. I mean, it's, what is that, 32 years old, but still, the 1,000-gallon Duracrete is a good tank, and it'll last decades.
I had another, where you said, at the very beginning, you said you're under contract. Have you purchased the property?
I haven't, and that's only because of this. Like, I don't want to purchase and not be able to do anything.
Sure, that
And I've told them that as well. Said, hey, I'm going to meet with the Board of Adjustment on this date, and I won't close until then. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to buy a camping spot for the amount of money they want for that, you know.
We weren't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So here are the things, I talked briefly in the pre-meeting. So these are the 3 things that we would need prior to the board granting a variance, which, you know, based on the discussion tonight, however you want to, you know, determine that with the applicant. But basically the engineered drawings talking about the base flood elevation and any documentation supporting that and verifying that the home that's proposed would be that 1 foot above that elevation. and then working whatever requirements with the Utah County Health Department, whether that's a new sewer, whether that's a modification of the existing one, that would need to be determined before we would come back to the Board of Adjustment.
Sewer, but new septic, right?
Sorry, new septic, yeah.
That'd cost a little bit more.
So, yeah, if you could just attach the other 4 homes and then just.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Pull it up the canyon.
So, and then, of course, there may be some Provo water users, meeting that may need to, address them as well with a new home being built. So those are the 3 things that the city would want to see, at least addressed before it comes back to the board. Now, tonight, the applicant here is just to see what the appetite is for a variance, and the only variance would be to the connection to the sewer, which is further down about a little over 2 miles down the road. But there are stringent requirements in Chapter 10 that we're going to make sure that he can comply with, and that's where the engineer drawings and the health department things would come into play. So,
And I'm assuming, Sean, that you know that if we grant the variance after we have a discussion, come back and meet again, that the cost that will be those other things, like, for example, the flood level, like, let's say that flood level elevation comes in at a certain height, which makes no sense that you do have to build underneath, that you would have to ensure that 100% for free.
Right.
You understand, right?
Yeah, so I've already spoken with a couple engineers. I've got one that I'm just waiting for this meeting as well to pay him as a retainer and do the work.
Right.
So he'll establish that base flood, because there are no markers up the canyon right now to establish that base flood elevation, so he would do that, and then whatever it would cost to build 1 foot above that, I understand.
Right.
It's on me.
Right.
Is that what you're saying to me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As long as you understand,
Yeah.
like for me, I'm a proponent of property owner rights, and it looks like the city and the county are trying to give you a pathway. Could be a little costly, but
Yeah. Well, and that would be a public service too. I mean, it's going to cost me money to do that base flood elevation, but then those are established markers, and no one would ever have to do it again. So
right.
I understand that.
Probably my biggest concern in terms of the septic system is knowing where if it needs to be relocated, if that's required, where that could be on this property. I'd want to know that there's an actual place that's big enough and in the right spot before I consider it.
I mean, it very well could be that it isn't an acceptable location, isn't it?
it's possible.
Yeah. So I just have to go through that permitting process.
And we'd probably require that to be done at least for an extensive period, so that at least the county can give us some assurance that yes, it can be relocated, and here it can be, at this location, we're comfortable issuing that permit, or even you get a permit. So we'd have to get at least down that road before we would come back to the board.
We'd need that information before we take action.
Yes, that would be staff's opinion, that we wouldn't allow him to come. That sounds kind of rude, but we wouldn't come back until that information is acquired.
So I have a question about your design of the proposed building. If the county says, yeah, okay, but you got to put the septic tank here, and it's too close to the house, do you have an alternative, or are you okay just redesigning what you're looking at?
Yeah, there's only one place to put the home, and there's.
Yeah, but it might have to be smaller, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Or shaped differently.
I think there's plenty of space on that long, pointy end of that lot. If it had to be relocated, that's where I would imagine they would tell me. It wouldn't be closer to the river from where it is. So right now, it's between the home and the river, but it's still 40 feet, 50 feet off, maybe even more of the river. So I wouldn't be surprised if they said that's a good spot. But if it does have to be moved, it would just be moved closer to Provo Canyon Road, and then on the west side of that home. So there's plenty of room right there to do that if that was required. I don't think it will affect the size of the home personally, but I mean, if it has to come down a few square feet, I mean, 1455 isn't a big home anyway. So if it's 1255, it's not going to make it that much difference, and to me.
Do you know where the septic tanks are, their homes, where they land?
No idea.
Not
There's no maps. There's no, it's funny because we all take for granted the internet, but when they switched it in 1988 and 1990, whatever, like they lost so many, or they just didn't record them. They didn't get transposed over. So I looked for a long, long time for something on this, and we couldn't find anything. So I'd be surprised if there's anything on any of that street. And this was a newer one. This was 1989, 1990 when they replaced this one.
I guess the difference between this home and the other four is that he's coming in now with new standards, and that's kind of throwing him into a different requirement than these other previous homes had done, 5, 20, 30 years ago.
The current homeowner keeps telling me I'm wrong because he had spoken with the city 2 years ago before the FEMA guidelines had been codified, and so he's upset because he could have built whatever he wanted 2 years ago and not have to go through this process. So
Know how, this may not matter, do we know how big, with the leach field and everything, that a septic system has to be?
That's going to have to be determined by the health department based on what
On-
he's proposing. Yep.
they're usually a pretty, like if you look up septic information, usually a pretty standard size, from 20 feet wide by 30 feet long or something along those lines. Like there's not a lot of variance between drain fields.
Sounds like you're pretty open to changing your plans as far as the plan of the house, if need be.
Yeah, as far as the location, I don't think it goes in.
The location, but the size.
Yeah, I mean, if it needs to come in a little bit, I think it fits perfectly on the setbacks. And honestly, if they tell me to move the septic, it can go clear down in this point. If that's still wide enough for the septic tank, and that's going to be even further away from the house, even in its current layout, with this site plan. So I'm not worried about that. That's, I think
You're
what
okay with-
you're implying is that if it's too close to the house or those type of things, then I don't know if there's a setback for a septic tank. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not
Like if it has to be 5 feet away from the house or 30 feet away from the house, I don't know that.
I don't either. That's something the health department.
Mm-hmm. During the permitting process, I'm sure they'll look at that.
So that's a really important piece of information, and that application that you need to make to the health department
Mhm.
so that you can get all that information.
Yep.
We need that information too, so that we can.
I think it looks really cool, and I hope it goes through for you.
Yeah, me too. I grew up in Orem, so I mean that's a dream to have a little cabin right there on the Pro River. I mean, I threw 1,000 woolly buggers in
Oh.
the river growing up. So
Yeah,
it'd be awesome.
We were wondering what your plan is as far as, are you going to be living in it full time, or?
No, I live in Highland, so we'll use it, and I mean honestly, we'll likely Airbnb it a little bit.
Part of it.
Yeah, I mean I wouldn't want to lead you astray, but like it'd be good for that. It'd be good for I have lots of family around, so we would use it as much as we wanted, and then when we weren't using it, we probably Airbnb it a little bit.
What do the neighbors think?
I have spoken with.
Not about the Airbnb or whatever, just you coming in.
Yeah. So I've spoken. I went in before I even put in an offer. I went and knocked on the doors and introduced myself and talked to neighbors, asked them what it was like, what they liked about it. I told them what my plans were. I would say 4 out of the 5 were amenable to it, and the 5th, which is actually the next door neighbor, she's fine with it. She just wants everybody to leave her alone and be quiet. And she's been there a long time. I think her grandma owned it, and she has slowly inherited it over time.
Yeah.
But the rest of the neighbors said that she's a little bit grouchy too. So I actually took how she responded to me. I took it as a positive. So everybody seems fine with it, and I told them what we're gonna do, and I think it's better a nice new home with some landscaping than a rundown cabin with nobody taking care of it. I think they'd prefer the former.
Are you going to run solar there or anything like that?
No, it has electricity. It has
Oh.
Provo City water. The only catch really is the septic. So everything else is set up and it's working and running. And
I'm surprised at how nice it looks.
Yeah.
Maybe, is it run down inside, or?
yeah, I mean, you probably wouldn't sleep overnight in it.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it would be more than tent camping, less than glamping right now. Kind of in the middle there. Yeah, it's not great. You'd probably want to go to the bathroom outside, not inside.
So that looks pretty flat, and it's river bottom.
Mhm.
So is the house where the house is that any higher than the surrounding area?
Yeah, I would say as you walk towards the river away from the home, it's probably a 10-foot drop from the level yard down to the river.
Okay.
I would say 10 feet. So all the neighbors, their lots back up to it, their decks are over it. They have that, one neighbor has that awesome bridge that goes from their backyard to the
road,
path.
to path.
Oh, cool, yeah. So this one is set back close to the highway.
Okay.
Yeah. So right on the right-hand picture, and actually left-hand too, between the trees, and then that fallen tree, that's where you'd walk down
Yeah.
to the river.
That's good that it's that far, that distance, because I think 1 foot, that's not much. That's, if it floods, you're gonna get flooded.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it just depends on where the base flood elevation is. It doesn't really matter if it's 10 feet down to the river, it's where the base flood elevation.
Yeah, where-
It might be the window of that cabin, who knows? What base flood elevation is. I don't know. Yeah.
We have no idea.
That's
Yeah.
so I've got to hire this guy, this engineer to go out there and do all that work.
But there's that one that, what you're talking about, the bridge, I mean, their back door and
Yeah.
their steps go right into the river.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that house ever going under.
Yeah.
In 29 years I lived.
I don't think it's a dangerous area, but that doesn't matter when it comes to like FEMA and base flood
Yeah.
elevation.
Oh.
I mean, they don't take that kind of stuff into consideration. It's just what it is, black and white.
Whatever they come up with.
Yep. So, I mean, if we have to do a crawl space foundation and bring it up a little bit, because the base flood elevation is based on the bottom floor, bottom livable floor. So I could do a crawl space foundation, do something like that to bring it up.
You do crawl, as long as all the equipment is above that 1 foot, but you could do a crawl space.
Yep.
Sounds like you've thought of a lot of different ideas to.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complicated lot. I want to make it work, and so I've done a lot of homework. I mean, I've already spent $6,000 or $7,000 doing all this stuff and trying to figure out if it's going to work. Obviously, that's a much smaller expense than actually buying it from this guy and then not being able to do it. So, I mean, my ask obviously is just if I can get the septic to pass, if I can get these things to pass base flood elevation, can I do it?
Can't imagine that we would decline it.
Okay.
So you know what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so. I need to establish the septic. So where it is, if it's acceptable, drain fields running, what the county says I have to.
From the county.
Right. So I already talked to the county, and there's a permit process that I have to go through and pay for that. So I would assume that that takes care of all those things. I know they're going to send somebody out to then survey the septic and the area. So that will take care of all those things. And then other than that, the base flood elevation.
Oh, yeah, the drawings that go along with the base flood. Yep.
Yeah, the engineering that goes along with that.
Yep, and then we'll probably have you get in contact with the Provo water users, just to make sure there's no, discussion you need to have with the board that oversees the drainage along the river.
Okay.
That's something we'll work on as well, so.
I haven't seen that point, so if you'll send that to me, then I'll work on that, because I've already talked to
Yep.
Provo City Water, but not specifically about that.
Okay.
Barbecue at my house if we can make this happen.
You get all that done.
It might be next summer. Yeah, it'll take a while.
So if I could just make a quick comment. I mean, obviously the purpose of this meeting was just for you to get a sense of, what the Board of Adjustment thought about it, but just understand, there's no commitment that they would approve your variance ultimately. They would still have discretion to either approve or deny when it comes back for a final determination.
Sure.
So.
I understand that, thanks.
Yeah.
Mhm. Legalese.
Fires us.
What did you say?
Or if he fires us before the next meeting.
That's right.
So just a point of clarification, so when he is ready to come back, we would notice this meeting again, so we'd go through the same process. We'd notice the neighbors, we'd do all that again, so we're just continue it to a meeting in the future. We're not gonna specify a date. When it's ready, then we'll process it through this normal process.
Was there any notification sent out for this meeting?
There was, yep. So we sent out.
Probably
Four
those
neighbors.
four, yeah.
Well,
That was the four neighbors.
Yeah.
The city council, and
I saw.
some staff got it, and
Mhm.
I'm sure, yeah.
Rivers high, the trout are hugging the banks.
So we need a motion to continue this item to the next undisclosed meeting.
I so move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes to continue this item to the next meeting, whenever that will be. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, we need the minutes from July 17th, 2019. Anybody that was here?
I was here.
Oh, you were here. Oh, good. Oh, good.
They look good.
They look good?
Good.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion passes.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you. Let's just move right on here.
I'll second.
Let's go.
Mr. Moulton seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Yes. Thanks for